This farmer is about to be impressed by Clover,
Graddocks.
a surprising new dairy product from the Dairy Crest creameries.
Graddocks.
Adding natural oil makes Clover spread, even when cold.
Graddocks.
But churning it with full cream, just like traditional butter, means Clover still has a real butter taste.
Struggle, buddy.
I think he likes it. New Clover. It's spreadable, but decidedly chuckle-butty.
And this young man approaching the table, attempting for the first time to make himself a milk drink without making a mess, using milk meat, a delicious new kind of milk flavouring from McDougall's. He's gone for the pink. He squeezed that in, and very smooth. It's gone down. Perfect. Almost perfect. New milk meat. Tasty, squeezy, and ever so easy.
Sale starts Thursday at these Portsea Island Co-op stores. With extra savings all around the store. Sale starts Thursday at 9 a.m.
Discover the sun-ripened natural flavor of Squirt. America's softest big drink.
This is TVS, now the time's 5:45.
The news at 5:45 with Michael Nicholson.
It's been a patchy day of solidarity for the miners. Prime Minister defends her Common Market deal in the Commons. And small is beautiful, and she's called Daisy. Good evening. In the day of solidarity for the miners, thousands marched through central London and many train services have been disrupted. This morning, though, it had less impact than expected, with most commuters making it to work. This evening, there are signs that some railway services out of the capital have been badly hit. British Rail say that only 50% of trains are running to the Midlands, and there's a very restricted service to Scotland. At the end of the London March, Mr. Scargill said the miners were going to roll back the years of Thatcherism. Support for the day of action was mixed. In Fleet Street, 3 of the national papers weren't printed, but the others appeared with adverts or letters from the union supporting the miners. Worst hit was British Rail, who reported patchy services on the commuter lines into London. In the morning, services were said to be between 50 and 80%. This evening, though, BR was warning that things could get worse. The Underground was hardly affected at all, and with many workers apparently taking the day off, the roads were unexpectedly free of congestion. Arriving to lead the march, the miners' leader, Arthur Scargill, was greeted with enthusiasm. Organisers said 20,000 joined the march, the police 11,000, but by mid-afternoon both were agreeing on one thing, that it was well ordered. In Fleet Street, big lunchtime crowds had gathered, whether out of curiosity or support, it was hard to tell. Some Fleet Street workers made it plain they did support the miners. And surprisingly large numbers of city workers were seen contributing to miners' funds and wearing their badges. As the mile-long march crossed Waterloo Bridge, the miners and their supporters threw red carnations they'd been carrying all day into the river, a demonstration in memory of the 2 miners killed on picket lines since the start of this long dispute. In Jubilee Gardens, a 2-minute silence for the 2 pickets, and then a message from Mr. Scargill.
With the kind of solidarity that we are displaying in this demonstration, we cannot lose this fight. More important, we will begin to roll back the years of Thatcherism. We shall begin to turn economic ruin into economic prosperity. We can turn unemployment into employment for all. But at the end of the day, we should recognise that this is the fight for the right to work. It's the noblest aim that we can have. Join us in that fight and victory will be ours.
Garth Smith, ITN, Central London. Steel unions at Llanwern in South Wales say the plant is in danger because of the miners' strike. They claim shortages have caused coke ovens to collapse there. The steelmen have now pledged that they'll use coal and iron ore supplies from any source to try to keep the plant going. A union official said we'll not stand idly by and see Llanwern die. The trains carrying iron ore to the steel plant were again halted today when their drivers refused to cross the picket line.
British Steel was apparently anxious to distance itself from the steelworkers' press conference, although it was held inside the plant. Miners' pickets were on duty outside the gate, and there was obviously deep resentment from the union committee at Llanwern because they feel they've been singled out for harsh treatment by the miners. They said they'd take raw materials from anywhere to protect the plant.
Our fear is this plant will be shut down because of this short supply of materials into this plant, and other people then would take, if you like, certain decisions that could have a long-term effect on this plant. And we're very clear about that. We haven't come through a slimline on this plant to stand idly by to see that happen. As much as we want to talk to people and get around a table and come to some sort of understanding or arrangement, we're not standing idly by and seeing this plant die.
But why had Llanwern been singled out?
We are the easiest ones to it. That's the simple reason why we're the easiest one to it. But let me say this, we all dedicated to Llanwern here. But we're dedicated as a trade union movement. And we're trying to convince our brothers in the NUM and Aslif and Anywar to look after us for God's sake, or this community will be dead.
But the steelmen's pleas are likely to fall on deaf ears. The miners have already made it perfectly plain that they want their strike to bite. And in order to do that, they want cuts in production in the steel industry.
It's believed there's a new move by some officials of the miners' union to disqualify members who have carried on working during the strike. The proposal's in the form of a motion which is to be debated at a special delegates conference next month. The motion appeared on an agenda that had been leaked to a journalist. At least 6 pickets have been arrested outside the Bilston Glen colliery in Scotland after miners charged a police cordon. It happened as working miners started to leave the colliery at the end of their shift.
Trouble started as pickets watched the shift change at Bilston Glen this afternoon. Most of the men involved are safety workers authorised by the union, but the pickets were certain some were working miners. They decided to charge at the police lines. It was a vain attempt to reach the main gate. During these scuffles, 6 pickets were arrested. Eventually, a union official from Bilston Glen appealed for calm.
And there are no scabs coming into the pit. There's scabs going out, right? There's nobody came in there on the back shift bus that's other than safety cover. There are only 5 or 6 of them, right? Right? You're going to get lifted for nothing. I suggest we disperse and go away back to your buses.
And after a while, that's what happened. The pickets are expected to call off their action after tomorrow because the pit closes anyway for a 3-week holiday. Ken Rees, ITN, Scotland.
Now the rest of today's news, and in the Commons, Mrs Thatcher's been defending the deal on Britain's common market payments that was thrashed out at the Fontainebleau summit. She said the £660 million rebate and the other concessions meant a fairer and more soundly based system. But she got a rough reception from some of her own backbenchers, as well as from Labour's.
The Prime Minister got a mixed reception from the Commons for the deal she'd brought back from the summit, scepticism from Labour and some Conservatives, and praise for her tenacity from others. Mrs Thatcher claimed the agreement was a successful culmination of persistent efforts to solve the budget problem. Britain's contributions would now fall in real terms. The Labour leader Neil Kinnock disagreed, saying that because Mrs Thatcher had agreed to an increase in common market funds by accepting a higher ceiling on everybody's contributions from VAT, we would end up paying more. Mr Kinnock and a number of Conservatives objected to this increase in own resources, as it's called. Without a reform of the common agricultural policy, they argued, this extra money will just go to create yet bigger food mountains. Mrs Thatcher said the community finance ministers had been told to come up with financial measures to guarantee limits on agricultural spending. That pledge did not appease the critics. One Conservative, Peter Lilly, said that encouraging the common market to spend less by giving them more money was like offering an alcoholic unlimited whiskey on condition that he signed the pledge. But potential Tory rebels were more than matched by Conservatives getting up to congratulate the Prime Minister on a reasonable settlement. It doesn't now look as if the government will have much difficulty in getting Commons approval for the deal. Glenn Mathias, ITN, Westminster.
Mari Payne, the little girl whose body was found in Epping Forest after she had been missing for more than a year, was buried near her home in Essex today. Among the tributes was a wreath from prisoners at Wandsworth Jail, who had appealed for information during the police hunt for 4-year-old Mari.
Outside the family home in Goresbrook Road in Dagenham, flowers to the little girl who vanished 15 months ago were laid out on the family lawn. Many of them tributes from total strangers to the girl known to her family and friends simply as Mari. Outside the house, Mary's parents were joined by other members of the family, and her father, John Payne, stood patiently by as her mother, Brenda, helped her younger relations prepare for the service. Hundreds of friends and neighbours waited outside as Mary's coffin emerged from the house. For some, it was just too much. The funeral procession made its way slowly to the local cemetery just a mile from Marie's home. As the coffin was lowered into the grave, John and Brenda Payne were still fighting the emotions of the ceremony, a ceremony which ended with the blessing read out over the coffin. Kim Sabido, ITN at Dagenham in Essex.
A fire has wiped out the film stage used for the James Bond films at Pinewood Studios in Buckinghamshire. 60 firemen fought the blaze at the world's biggest film set, but were forced back when a series of gas bottles exploded. Dense clouds of poisonous fumes were sent into the air when sheets of polythene caught fire. The set was being used to make the 20th Century Fox film Legend, described as the most expensive project currently in production anywhere in the world. A Liberian oil tanker is reported to have been hit by an Exocet missile in the Gulf. It had just been loaded at the Iranian oil terminal at Karg Island when it was attacked, apparently by Iraqi planes. The 250,000-ton Tiburon, run by a Swiss company, was later said to be still afloat, but several of its crew are thought to have been injured. Israel and Syria have agreed on an exchange of prisoners, some held since the Israeli invasion of Lebanon 2 years ago. 6 Israelis will be freed tomorrow in return for 291 Syrians. The exchange follows months of negotiations monitored by the Red Cross. Mrs. Joan Morecambe, widow of the comedian Eric Morecambe, who has launched a £1 million campaign to fight the heart disease that killed her husband. A new research centre at St Mary's Hospital in London aims to cut the heart attack rate by diagnosing the trouble sooner. The comedian, who died after his 3rd heart attack last month, had planned to open the centre himself.
This highly sophisticated equipment is being used to detect the beginnings of heart disease. From these changing patterns, doctors monitor differences in the makeup of the heart muscle. Ultrasound measures the speed of red blood cells in the body's main blood vessel, again giving vital information. This is important because by far the biggest problem with heart disease is that you don't know you've got it until it's too late, which is what happened to Eric Morecambe.
Eric was such a very, very healthy and exuberant personality that he was the last one in the world anyone would have expected to have a heart attack. But if there was some way of, when you perhaps have an annual checkup, they also could tell whether the heart was actually sort of being damaged in any way or the arteries around the heart were becoming blocked, then yes, then perhaps he could have benefited from that.
And that is precisely the aim, to get this system out on the streets in just the same way as the mass X-ray vans were used to detect tuberculosis in the 50s. Joan Thurkettle, ITN at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington.
Prince and Princess of Wales have opened a new treatment centre in Salisbury for people with spine injuries. The Princess was particularly interested in the centre's swimming pool, where patients can take gentle exercise. She told other guests that she too enjoyed swimming. She said that Prince William was able to swim himself, but he needed just a little help from armbands. Now Wimbledon, and Britain's John Lloyd has gone through to the 3rd round of the men's singles. He beat the American Greg Holmes 3-1. And in one of the best games so far, Jimmy Connors found his old form in time to defeat Stefan Simonsen of Sweden.
Jimmy Connors was enjoying his tennis today. The early games were a showcase for his strength as much as his skill, with plenty of power from his opponent too. But whatever Stefan Simonsen tried, Connors had an answer, delighting in retrieving the impossible to create winners. Connors questioned the decision of one line judge, others took more direct punishment. But it was all in good humour. The Swede found his touch in the 3rd set, but with Connors on this form it was a lost cause. The final score 6-2, 6-1, 6-3. Anne Lucas, ITN Sport.
The British girls Anne Hobbs and Julie Salmon also made it safely to the next round, and the top women's seed, Martina Navratilova, won in straight sets against the fellow American Amy Holton. And the men's number 2, Ivan Lendl, beat the South African Derek Tarr in 3 sets. Main headlines again. Support for the day of action backing the miners' strike has been patchy, but it still looks like a rough journey home for many commuters from London. Finally, the foal who believes it's nice to be small, even though people look down on her. She was born 12 days ago on an Essex farm. Even the pet Alsatian towers above her, and the ordinary horses just don't know what to make of their new stablemate. Daisy's the newest in a noble line bred by the royal families of Europe for their children, and she stands only 13 inches high. Probably not bigger, much bigger than the TV screen you're watching now. But still, somebody loves her. Daisy's mother, Goldie, is just over 27 inches high, and as far as she's concerned, Daisy is small and beautiful. Channel 4 News tonight talks to the men who look certain to take over from Len Murray as General Secretary of the TUC, and pays a tribute to the man who made the film Guns of Navarone, Carl Foreman, who died in Hollywood today. But that's it so far from us this Wednesday evening. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow, 5:45. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Good evening, welcome. In a varied programme tonight, we have the Queen and Prince Philip in Dorset and the Prince and Princess of Wales in Wiltshire. We also have the hat that'll be turning heads at this year's Henley Regatta, and in sport, there's cricket and banger racing. But first, the sun's been shining on a royal day for the south. The Queen and Duke of Edinburgh have been touring the Royal Marines base at Hamworthy near Poole. Meanwhile, Prince Charles and Princess Diana have been opening a major new spinal treatment centre. First, the visit by the Queen and Prince Philip. Chris Peacock reports.
A ceremonial guard of honour found by 45 Commando Royal Marines waited for the Queen's arrival at Poole. She was here today to pay tribute to the role they played in the Falklands conflict 2 years ago. This wasn't just another Royal Roadshow. The Queen has a family interest in the work of the Royal Marines. Her youngest son, Prince Edward, has already been accepted for the Marines when he leaves Cambridge in 2 years' time. Half a mile away on the Hard at Poole Harbour, everything was ready for something of a show. A shipping channel in Poole Harbour had been turned into an exclusion zone for the royal couple to watch a demonstration by the Royal Marines. It's taken 2 years since the South Atlantic conflict to arrange this visit. The planning took more care than usual because this is the base of the undercover Special Boat Squadron. Such is the secret nature of their work that even the names of their commanding officers had been cut out of today's official programme to ensure their anonymity. Watching from a dais overlooking the harbour, the Queen and Prince Philip saw a sail past of landing craft. It was entirely appropriate for the Royal Marines based at Poole specialise in training for amphibious warfare. A Sea King helicopter made a parachute drop with men of the Special Boat Service. No doubt the Queen and Prince Philip were remembering the time when Prince Charles made his first parachute drop right here during his service with the Royal Navy. And then came a classic exercise in raiding a beachhead. It normally takes 3 weeks to plan and carry out. Today it took just 16 minutes. The Queen stood up for a better view as the commandos stormed ashore. Mock heroics for the Sovereign today, but 2 years ago, these were the men who sailed from Poole for a secret rendezvous with HMS Fearless in Portsmouth. They were bound then for the Falklands, where they were to win battle honours for their part in recapturing South Georgia and later breaking out from San Carlos and marching into Port Stanley. The Queen trod a cautious path onto a landing craft to talk to some of the men who'd taken part in the exercise. Wearing a dress and hat of lime green silk, she appeared to be in good humour. Also on parade, 16 veterans of the D-Day invasion, all present and correct, with 2 elderly sisters of the landing craft on display today. The most poignant moment of the visit came almost at the end, when the Queen stopped to look at a memorial dedicated to the 32 men of 3 Commando Brigade who lost their lives in the South Atlantic. And suddenly, the spectacle of the day was overshadowed by the human cost of a military operation. It could happen again, and if it does, the Queen was reminded, her Royal Marines at Poole will be among the first into action.
While the Queen and Prince Philip were in Dorset, the Prince and Princess of Wales were also out and about in the south. They were VIP guests in Salisbury. Prince Charles and Princess Diana were visiting 2 new health facilities in the grounds of Odstock Hospital. At a residential centre for handicapped young people, the royal couple met patients and staff, and it wasn't long before they'd fallen behind schedule. The princess, who's expecting her second baby in September, also unveiled a plaque commemorating their visit. The centre, which caters for 22 handicapped people, was established by local and national spastic societies and opened 6 years ago. A short distance away, dozens of guests and staff were waiting for the royal couple to open a new spinal injuries unit, which includes a large hydrotherapy pool. It's used to help exercise limbs damaged by paralysis. Perhaps it was the sense of tranquility or simply the heat of the day, but the princess obviously enjoyed the chance to sit down. In fact, she seemed determined to get as near to the water as possible without falling in when she spoke to patients using the pool. The tour of the new unit, named after the Prince as Duke of Cornwall, went on to the physiotherapy ward, and by this time the couple were almost an hour behind schedule. At the end of the visit, Princess Diana left by car, and Prince Charles went on a walkabout as he approached his helicopter. At one point, he was about to sign a plaster cast on a young boy's broken leg, and then changed his mind. He told the crowd if he did it once, he'd always be asked. Well, the Duke of Cornwall's spinal unit will fill a major need for paraplegics in the south who need care and treatment. Chris has been along to see the centre at work.
Dwayne is 16 years old. He broke his neck in a diving accident. But he's one of the lucky ones. When the Prince and Princess of Wales met him today, he was able to tell them that his spine was fractured but not broken. Given care and treatment, he will walk away from the Duke of Cornwall's Spinal Treatment Centre. Others will not. For them, the wheelchair will be part of their lives. What this new centre aims to do is to help them accept their disability and teach them to make the best use of what muscle control they have left.
I have one patient who said to me, well, no, our problems began when I left hospital. And now he's achieved completely normal life with a wife, a house, drives a car, and is in fact a senior draftsman in quite an important engineering factory.
The centre offers the best facilities for patients with spinal cord injuries, although best isn't a word that makes a lot of sense to a road crash victim who may come here paralysed from the neck down.
Well, I'm sure they've got to come to the realisation that they can live life again, and that this is, although an overwhelming injury, probably the most devastating thing that can happen to anybody, short of a major dominant hemisphere stroke, that life can go on, and they can actually achieve things within their life.
Many of the patients will come here as a direct result of car and motorcycle accidents.
Right.
This crash victim broke his neck and is learning how to balance his body.
Right. Use your hands to balance. Now, I want to try and get some twisting in the middle. Can you sit with yourself forwards again?
Physiotherapy is one of the most important aids to building up wasted muscles.
2. Go on,
Arms and shoulders need to be strengthened to support other limbs which may be paralysed.
And again.
Tony was admitted to the Duke of Cornwall Centre when it first opened 5 months ago. He severed his spine in a diving accident in Malta. But swimming is still his first love and allows him a degree of freedom in the centre's heated swimming pool under the supervision of physiotherapist Barbara Fox.
The value of the pool to Tony is to teach him to swim. He was a very good swimmer before his accident. His main sport when he leaves here will be swimming. And we want him to be able to go back and swim with family and friends. He has control of the muscles of his shoulder and elbow, and that's really all. He's swimming here just using his arms. He's very motivated to be as independent as possible. Right. And the more confidence we can give him in himself and in the water and in the chair, the better. And obviously any means we can use helps.
The centre will serve a catchment area of 6 million people in the Wessex and southwestern health regions. It will help remove some of the pressure on Stoke Mandeville. But above all, it will provide care and reassurance for people in the south who are trying very hard not to make a tragedy out of a crisis.
A man from the Winchester area has been reported for possible prosecution after yesterday's hit and run.